Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum class. Welcome to English grade 8 video lessons. I'm your instructor Zia Hamid. I hope that you're doing well. Students, today we will talk about different points of view. Since this chapter, Jalebis, is a short story. Now, we will see that how there are different narrative perspectives and point of views. So we have two learning outcomes today merged into one lecture, and they are serving the same competency. Number one is analyze how an author develops and contrasts the points of view of different characters or narrators in a text. And next one is we will analyze that how particular elements of a story or drama interact. For example, how these two elements of a story interact with each other, how the setting actually shapes the characters or plot. So let's break down the very first one. Here we will see that we know that there are different narrators of a story and different points of view. Now, how did the author develops on and how did he manages to engage these different points of view in a story? And next, we will see that how these elements of a story which makes up a story interact with one another, how they are important and how one influence the other. So I hope that you have read the story. This is a story about a boy who was struggling with his temptation, and then he faced consequences of that. You can see the vertical linkage, and for today's brainstorming session, you have to think and recall what is point of view in a story and what are different story elements. Now, students, think about it and then we can discuss it. Yes, in a story, there can be a point of view, first person, second person, or third person, omniscient or third person limited. And all these different elements like theme, plot, conflict, and characters, all these are making up a story, and also setting, they're very much important. Now, what do we understand by narration? Narration is what we call a story, and the narrator is the one who is telling the story in their own words. We have different perspectives. At first, in the story, the boy is responsible and has self-control. He was a very good boy. He actually won scholarship as well, 4 rupees per month. He thinks of himself as a good boy who remembers his religious lessons and does what he's supposed to do. But as he starts to feel tempted by the jalebis, he tries to make excuses for buying them. Like he said, I will buy the jalebis and I will pay my fee with the scholarship money that I will get. But in the end, he gives into the temptation and buys the jalebis, which leads to regret later, and then he got disturbed. He also bunked the school 2 days straight. So we have so many different moral lessons from this story, but we are going to focus on the point of view. We know that the story is actually narrated by himself, the main character. It was in the first person narrative, and there is also a perspective of the coins which he had in the pocket. That 4 rupees which he was going to pay the fee for, but the coins talked to him in a manner and convinced him to actually spend the money on jalebis. Now, the coins which represent temptation of eating and spending the money on jalebis, they are personified and developed into a persistent voice urging the boy to indulge in his desires. Now, in the story, we have a first person narrative, but we also have the coins personified because they were talking. This is a literary device which we call personification. And if you see the perspective of the coins, they are actually saying something. They are asking him to eat the delicious and tasty jalebis and don't worry about the money. Money is to be spent on such things, to have fun and cherish such delightful and delicious things. Now, if we are talking about the point of view of the story is in the first person, and the narrator, who is the boy, tells the story from his own perspective. But we also get to see the perspective of the coins, since there is a dialogue between the boy and the coins. Now, if we are talking about the different story elements, we have theme, setting, the characters, and all these different elements. But we also have plot development, some stages of plot development that include setting. We will explore this in the next lecture. However, we are just going to touch it. So, there are 5 elements of plot exposition. At this stage, you introduce your characters, establish the setting, and begin to introduce the primary conflict or problem of your story. The rising action, it begins with an inciting incident, a very first action which is taking the story to a rise, or a moment that sets your story into action. As it progresses, you'll have multiple moments of conflict, problem that develop and create tension as the story moves towards the climax. And this hooks up the reader of the story. When we are talking about climax, we know this is the highest point of the story and it is the peak of tension, plot and character in the story. It's the moment that your reader has been waiting for. We have the falling action because it is falling to a solution. This is the time to start resolving the problems or the conflicts and all the subplots that are opened up by the writer. So your story doesn't feel rushed in the last few chapters. So you have to take some subplots along with the main story. This is also where any conflicts that arise as a result of the climax can start being resolved. And finally, we are here at the solution of the story, just like we saw in the story that the boy started feeling regret and he told his parents about it. Finally, the resolution is the end of your story where you can tie up the final loose ends and bring your story to its happy or tragic ending. You can have 2 choices, either the ending can be happy or sad. Now, these are all the elements of plot. But students, one more important thing is setting if we are talking about elements. And you know that in the story, the setting is of a village and the boy is in the school, on the streets and in his home. And you can see that the boy who is just in a very lesser grade is young and very much active and a good boy. So we can see some scenes in the school, outside of the school, and all these are telling us that the boy is just a normal, regular school going boy, and it is very much general because at some point you might also had the same kind of temptation or same kind of desire to actually spend money on something else rather than the fee. All right. So you have to do this classroom activity by pausing the video. Identify different stages of plot in the story Jalebi. We have talked about all these different stages. You have to break down the different stages according to the story. What was the beginning of the story? What is the rising action, climax, falling action, and then the solution or end? So you have to find out in the story, mention it, and note down in your notebook. This is a link that you can watch to learn more about our main topic, and for your worksheet you have to first do this little punctuation activity, and then you have to summarize the stages of plot development as we learned. All these resources will be added. They can be accessed in the description of the video. I hope, students, that now you are very much clear about narratives, the point of view that we have in the story, and also the different elements. If the setting was changed, then how would have been the story ended? If the setting was changed, then how would have been our character? Since we are talking about a young character, he's a school going, so we have the setting of the school, which is very much important. And when we know that the story, the plot is actually of the setting of a school, we know that the story will be of children, of kids who are school going. So the setting will influence your plot, and it will also influence your characters. I'll see you in the next video lesson. Take care of yourselves. Allah Hafiz.